Imagine for a moment you are standing at the edge of dawn. The light hasn't yet broken through, but the air is thick with expectancy. The world around you, every sound, every flicker of wind feels strangely alive, as if waiting for you to see it differently. Now notice the space between your thoughts, that pause, that stillness that hums beneath every mental movement. It's not empty, it's the silent architect of your reality. You see, the story of your life isn't being written on paper. It's being written in vibration, in the quiet dimension of thought that surrounds and fills you. The desk, the sky, the face of someone you love. They are all reflections cast from a single, invisible projector consciousness. And yet, most of us spend our days staring at the movie screen, trying to fix the picture instead of remembering that we hold the real. We keep editing the shadows, when what truly needs tending is the light source itself. You've probably felt it before, that subtle moment when a single shift in mood changes everything you perceive. The same place, the same people, the same circumstances, but a different vibration. And suddenly, the world looks softer, clearer, kinder. That is not coincidence. That is the field responding. Consciousness shapes perception, and perception shapes the texture of reality. To know this isn't theory, it's freedom. Because once you sense how thought vibrates into form, you stop chasing control and start cultivating clarity. So before we journey inward, I invite you to like and subscribe, but only if it truly resonates with your soul. Because this is not entertainment, it's remembrance. We're about to walk into the living field of thought itself, where reality is not something that happens to you, but something that happens through you. Everything begins as awareness, and awareness begins as movement. Before thought becomes word, before word becomes event, it exists as a vibration in the unseen fabric of consciousness. You are immersed in that fabric right now. Most people imagine their mind as something small, trapped behind the eyes, inside the skull. But in truth, your mind radiates far beyond the boundaries of your body. It extends into the very space you occupy. You are not thinking in the world. You are thinking through it. Every thought you hold sends a subtle pulse outward, a signal that mingles with the field around you. Some call it energy, others call it aura. But in essence, it's the same thing, thought in motion. And this motion interacts with everything else in existence. The field responds to the tone of your inner dialogue, not the wording of your intentions. You can affirm 1,000 times that you are at peace, but if the vibration beneath those words carries tension or doubt, the field reflects that tension back to you. Consciousness doesn't read your sentences, it feels your frequency. Take a breath. Notice what you are broadcasting right now, not your words, not your surface emotions, but the underlying signal humming beneath your awareness. That hum is your contribution to the collective atmosphere of existence. In the ancient esoteric sense, this field is not metaphorical, it is literal, though invisible. Every thought is a wave that travels through the ocean of mind stuff, subtle but real, influencing what the senses later interpret as physical experience. Reality is a mirror of the invisible interplay between countless thought waves, converging, colliding, harmonizing. When you understand this, responsibility ceases to feel like burden. It becomes creative power. Because you realize you are not a victim of circumstance, you are an artist of vibration. The brush in your hand is awareness. The canvas is the world. And yet, this field is neutral. It carries no judgment, no preference. It simply amplifies whatever tone you sustain. That's why two people can live in the same city, face the same events, yet perceive entirely different worlds. One sees hostility and chaos. The other finds opportunity and grace. The difference isn't in the world, it's in the resonance through which it's perceived. To work with the field, you must first feel it, not conceptually, but experientially. Close your eyes for a moment and let your attention expand beyond your body. Sense the invisible presence that envelops you. That presence isn't out there. It's an extension of your consciousness. You can learn to move within it, not by effort, but by attunement. When your thought aligns with clarity, when your intention carries sincerity, the field begins to organize itself in harmony with that state. You start to notice coincidences, synchronicities, intuitive nudges. They are not random. They are the field responding to the signal you have become. This is where self-awareness deepens, because if you are the broadcaster, then every recurring experience is feedback, a message from the dimension of thought, showing you what vibration you've been living in. The universe is not testing you, it's translating you. Anchor this truth. Your experience of the world is the echo of your inner frequency. That's the first law of conscious creation, not control, but coherence. And as that realization settles in, a quiet curiosity arises. If every thought has vibration, and every vibration has pattern, then there must be a deeper architecture behind how thought takes shape. Something elegant, something ordered, something waiting to be remembered. And that's where we move next into the architecture of inner space. The deeper you look into thought, the less it behaves like a line of words and the more it reveals itself as a landscape. Every belief, emotion, or subtle assumption you hold is a structure within that invisible terrain, shaping how awareness travels through your inner world. If the field of consciousness is the atmosphere you breathe, then this architecture is the skeleton of that invisible body, the pattern that determines how energy moves through you. Each idea, whether empowering or limiting, forms a corridor. Each memory becomes a doorway. Together they create the invisible architecture through which perception walks. When you feel trapped, you are often not trapped by life itself, but by the design of these inner hallways. Some lead to open skies, others loop endlessly through the same emotional rooms. You keep finding the same conversations, the same disappointments, the same fears, different faces, same blueprint. To perceive this architecture is to realize that thought is spatial. It has dimension, weight, and structure. It is not just what you think it is where you think from. Each state of consciousness is a room with its own view of the world. Stand in anger, and the world appears hostile. Stand in gratitude, and the world rearranges itself into beauty. Nothing outside has changed. Only the location of your awareness within the architecture has shifted. Every human being carries a private cathedral of thought. The sacred task is not to demolish it, but to renovate it, to bring light into the forgotten chambers and open windows where there were once walls. This is not about positive thinking, it is about structural clarity. When light enters the architecture of mind, shadows lose their power. Pause for a moment and sense your own interior. Feel where your awareness usually rests. Some thoughts feel high and expansive, airy and illuminated. Others pull downward, dense and constrictive. Notice how the body follows these movements. Posture, breath, even the subtle rhythm of the heart adjusts to the shape of the thought you inhabit. Consciousness builds the frame, and the body becomes its echo. In esoteric understanding, this architecture extends beyond the personal mind. It connects to a collective lattice, a web of thought forms humanity has constructed over centuries. When a large number of people hold the same emotional vibration, a collective structure forms in the astral and mental planes. This is why certain moods can sweep through a culture like weather. We breathe in not only oxygen but psychic climate, and yet you are never powerless within this network. Awareness is both the builder and the witness. The moment you see the pattern, you begin to rise above it. Observation itself begins to rewrite the blueprint. It's as if a light reconfigures the walls the instant it enters. That is the essence of inner transformation, not escape, but illumination. To work with the architecture of thought is to learn subtle craftsmanship. You start to recognize the materials you've used to construct your worldview. Fear builds from distortion. Faith builds from clarity. Compassion uses transparency. Light moves freely through it. The more transparent the material, the less resistance consciousness meets, and the more harmoniously energy flows. This is why old emotional wounds can feel like thick walls. They were built from dense material, heavy with resistance. But as you revisit them with awareness, the density begins to dissolve. Memory remains, but the structure becomes light-filled, permeable. Pain transforms into wisdom, not by erasing the past, but by changing the vibrational geometry around it. Every structure of thought is temporary. The soul is the architect, not the building. And when you grasp this, the question naturally arises if the architecture defines how awareness moves. What gives it motion in the first place? What animates this inner design with life, rhythm, and pulse? The answer lies not in the structure, but in its vibration. Let's follow that pulse now, into the realm where frequency breathes meaning into form, into vibration. Frequency and the pulse of awareness. If the architecture of thought forms the structure, vibration is its heartbeat. Everything that exists, stone, light, emotion, idea moves. There is no such thing as true stillness, only frequencies too subtle or too vast for the senses to register. Consciousness itself is vibration. Awareness is simply the point where vibration begins to recognize itself. Every thought hums at a particular tone. It's not metaphor. It's physics expressed through spirit. When you feel calm, your awareness vibrates in long, slow waves that open space and perception. When you are anxious or angry, the vibration tightens, becomes jagged, and your world appears smaller, sharper, more fragmented. The world mirrors not what happens, but how your energy moves through it. Take a single moment of clarity, perhaps the way you breathe after forgiving someone. The air feels different, doesn't it? It's as if reality exhales with you. That sensation is frequency shifting. You are tuning to a higher coherence. And the field around you responds by harmonizing to that new pitch. The world begins to sound in tune again. Every emotion, every perception, every thought you dwell upon broadcasts a signal into the living matrix of consciousness. This signal is not judged or filtered. It's received and amplified. The universe is a perfect listener. It echoes the tone you sing. Fear begets contraction. Joy expands. Gratitude refines the signal until it becomes luminous. None of this requires belief. It requires awareness. In esoteric philosophy, vibration is the bridge between the unmanifest and the manifest. Spirit moves, and that movement becomes sound, light, matter. The ancients knew this long before science named it the Word, the Logos, the Aum, all symbols of primordial vibration. Creation is an ongoing resonance, a song still being sung. You are one note in that cosmic chord, so when your personal vibration shifts, the song of your life shifts with it. Patterns that once repeated begin to dissolve because their frequency no longer matches yours. People appear or drift away according to resonance. Opportunities unfold not because you chase them, but because the tone of your consciousness calls them into harmony. To sense your vibration, listen to your body. It is the most honest translator of your frequency. If tension lingers in your chest, if thoughts race, the vibration is discordant too fast, too fractured. When breath deepens and presence feels wide, the tone is balanced. The goal is not constant serenity, but conscious modulation, knowing how to retune yourself when the instrument of awareness drifts. Try this simple alignment now. Breathe slowly and imagine your awareness as a sphere of light expanding with each exhale. Feel it stabilize, smooth, deepen. Don't force peace tune to it. The more consistently you hold that tone, the more the field mirrors it back as order, clarity, and synchrony. You don't chase harmony. You become it, and the world follows. Once you begin to live as vibration rather than personality, the question arises, how does the outer world know what to reflect? How does experience arrange itself to meet the music of your mind? That is the secret of resonance itself, the mirror principle, where life shows you the frequency you've been broadcasting all along. And that's where we turn next into the mirror principle. When you begin to live as vibration rather than thought alone, life takes on a strange transparency. The events that unfold around you no longer feel random. They start to echo the rhythm of your inner tone. It's as if existence itself has become a mirror, reflecting the frequency you inhabit. This is the mirror principle, the law of resonance made visible. The world does not judge, reward, or punish. It reflects, amplifies, and reveals. Each experience, pleasant or painful, is a mirror held up by the field to show you what's active within your consciousness. The mind tends to make this personal. I must have done something wrong, it says when difficulty arises, but reflection is not accusation. It is information. The mirror doesn't scold, it simply displays what stands before it. When the reflection is distorted, the invitation is not to blame the glass, but to look more clearly at the energy you are projecting. Imagine you are standing before a lake at sunrise. If the surface is calm, the reflection of the sky is flawless. If it's stirred by wind or stones, the image shatters. The sky hasn't changed, the turbulence is in the water. So it is with consciousness. When the surface of awareness is disturbed by fear or resistance, the reflection of life appears broken. Calm the waters, and reality becomes transparent again. You've witnessed this many times without naming it. A day when you feel grateful seems to flow with ease. People smile. Solutions appear. Another day, clouded by irritation, and the same world feels obstructed. The external scene is neutral. The internal vibration gives it meaning. In esoteric understanding, the mirror operates across all planes. The physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual dimensions constantly exchange resonance. What you experience outwardly is the condensed form of inner vibration, the thought made visible. And because everything reflects, each relationship, each circumstance, is an opportunity to read the script of your subconscious beliefs. Here lies the quiet power of awareness, when you stop reacting to the reflection and start listening to what it reveals. Growth accelerates. Pain transforms into instruction. Frustration becomes feedback. The universe speaks through reflection until awareness hears it directly. Anchoring into this perspective shifts how you meet the world. No longer asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin to wonder, "What is this showing me?" That single shift dissolves the posture of resistance and turns every moment into dialogue with the field. The mirror becomes teacher, alchemy, oracle. Still, reflection alone is not the full picture. A mirror can show only what already exists. Beneath the reflection lies something deeper, the gravitational center that determines what is being reflected in the first place. It's the pattern of belief, the unseen force that pulls certain experiences into orbit while letting others drift away. And so, the journey continues inward, from the surface of reflection to the source of gravity itself, into the gravity of belief. Belief is the invisible gravity that shapes the orbit of your reality. It is not a thought you think, it is the frequency you stand upon. Every perception, every judgment, every expectation circles around the gravitational pull of what you hold as true. The universe, in its neutrality, does not choose for you. It simply responds to the weight of your conviction. Whatever you believe with emotional coherence bends the field toward manifestation, not because belief commands reality, but because belief is the lens through which energy organizes itself. You can sense this gravity in your daily life. When you believe you are unwanted, the world seems full of closed doors. When you believe you belong, those same doors appear open, familiar, welcoming. The shift doesn't come from effort. It comes from a change in orbit. Belief is the architecture beneath vibration. It holds the resonance steady long enough for experience to crystallize. That's why casual thoughts rarely manifest, but deeply held convictions become living realities. They are stable vibrations, gravitational fields within consciousness. The danger lies in forgetting that beliefs are not absolute. They are decisions repeated until they solidify. Every limiting belief began as a thought, reinforced by emotion, eventually sinking deep enough to feel immovable. But even the densest planet can be shifted by a stronger pull, a higher truth, a new awareness. You might have noticed this in moments of awakening. When you suddenly see through an old narrative, something in your energy lightens. What once felt inevitable begins to dissolve. This is belief losing its density, its gravitational authority, and when that happens, entire patterns of experience rearrange. Awareness is the catalyst. To observe a belief is to loosen its grip. You don't need to fight it or prove it wrong, simply see it. Shine consciousness on the conviction that I am not enough, and you'll sense its artificial weight begin to lift. The more light you bring, the less gravity it holds. Yet belief isn't the enemy, it's the scaffolding through which consciousness learns. Each belief, even the painful ones, serves a purpose. It shapes perspective. Anchors experience, gives the soul a point of contrast. Through them, awareness evolves from rigidity to fluidity. To master belief is to reclaim authorship. You start to choose what gravitational centers you wish to orbit. Instead of being pulled by inherited stories, you begin to craft your own. You realize that faith, true faith, is not blind acceptance, but conscious alignment with possibility. Faith is belief refined by awareness. Pause here for a moment. Feel into one belief you carry about yourself, not the one you speak aloud, but the one that hums beneath your choices. Sense how it shapes the tone of your world. Now imagine releasing its weight, even slightly. Notice how spacious the field feels when you do. That is freedom. Your consciousness rebalancing its gravity. Anchor this realization. Belief is not truth, it is agreement. And agreements can be rewritten. As the gravity of belief loosens, something extraordinary becomes clear. Your attention, your conscious focus emerges as the true creative instrument. It's the force that directs energy once belief yields its control. Where belief defines orbit, attention defines trajectory, and that trajectory determines what becomes real. So we follow the beam of awareness itself into the alchemy of attention. There is a subtle difference between wanting something and attending to it. Want is wishful, attend is practical. Attention is the hand that sculpts thought into pattern. It is the focused light that causes possibility to take shape. Over time, this simple activity where you place your gaze, what you hold in mind, becomes the artisan of your inner world and, by extension, the world you perceive. Attention is not merely concentration, it is the quality of your presence poured into an object, a person, or an idea. When your attention is scattered, your life fragments into disconnected scenes. When it is steady, those fragments begin to cohere into an intelligible whole. The difference is not moral, it is architectural. A scattered attention builds flimsy rooms. A sustained attention lays deep foundations. Think of attention as a garden. Seeds fall everywhere, but only those you water will sprout. The same holds true for thought. A passing idea may be interesting. It will not become destiny until you return to it. Nourish it with rehearsal. Feel it with conviction. Repetition gives it density. Feeling gives it motion. Soon, what was casual becomes central. In quiet moments, you can notice exactly what you have been watering without intending to. That notice is the first practical step toward change. Attention is the artisan of reality. The alchemy at work here is deceptively simple. Attention orders energy. When you attend to something, you focus an amount of consciousness that organizes surrounding possibility. Energy aligns, synchronicities surface. The mind appears to orchestrate coincidence because attention has shaped the conditions in which those events can arise. This is not magic. It is technique and applied law of inner mechanics. The more skillful your attention, the less you need to force outcomes. Instead, you create conditions in which the desired form can naturally appear. There is also a moral dimension to attention, though not in a judgmental sense. What you habitually attend to becomes the axis of your experience. A life tuned to fear will produce fearful evidence. A life tuned to curiosity will produce openings and questions that invite growth. Attention does not favor the sensational. It simply amplifies. You see what you point to, and you live in the consequences of that seeing. This is accountability translated into practice. To choose where you look is to choose the reality you cultivate. Practical skill with attention begins with small, deliberate acts. Notice where your mind drifts during mundane moments while walking, waiting, or listening. The habitual drift reveals the grooves your attention has worn. You are not trying to stop thinking. You are learning to steer where thought is allowed to linger. Over time, this steering becomes second nature. The mind becomes a vessel for intentional focus rather than an open field for random winds. Attention and intention are cousins but not identical. Intention sets direction. Attention supplies the fuel. You can intend to be kinder, wiser, or freer. But without attention, those intentions remain polite statements. When attention attaches itself to intention, caring for it with presence, feeling, and consistency, the intention grows into a lived habit. This is why rituals of presence matter. They teach attention how to stay. Practices that anchor you in the body breath, posture, simple tasks done mindfully train the nervous system to hold focus without strain. The result is not rigidity, but a responsive stillness that can move with life instead of being tossed by it. There is a delicate art to redirecting attention away from unhelpful patterns without feeding them. When upsetting thoughts arise, the most common reaction is to push them away, which paradoxically keeps attention glued to them. The more effective move is to allow the thought a brief viewing acknowledgement without story, then deliberately shift attention to something aligned with your chosen tone. This is not suppression. It is skillful redirection. You become less reactive when you know how to shift, less captive when you know how to steer. Attention is also communal. The fields we inhabit are not private bubbles, but participatory spaces, where groups collectively attend to fear, to outrage, to inspiration. They create shared climates that affect all members. This is why the quality of your personal attention matters beyond your own life. When you sustain attention in clarity and kindness, you alter the ambient field. You do not save the world with a single thought, but you contribute to a subtle milieu that others breathe. Your practice is quietly political in its influence, an act of cultural repair that requires no public spectacle, only steady presence. You become what you attend to. Finally, attention matures into discernment. There is a point where you no longer need to attend to every startling impression. You can sense which impulses are seeds and which are detritus. This discernment is not cold cleverness. It is a compassionate fidelity to the life you intend to live. It chooses what will be nourished and what will be allowed to fall away. As this capacity strengthens, your actions grow more effective because they arise from a concentrated, coherent center rather than scattered urgency. When attention has been trained, the flow from inner to outer becomes more harmonious. Your choices land with clarity. Opportunities present themselves in forms you recognize because your attention has shaped the pattern that attracts them. The field begins to respond in kind, less friction, more intelligible alignment. What once felt like effortful striving turns into attentive cultivation. As attention sculpts form, it always meets feeling. Emotion is the current that animates the shapes attention has created. Without it, even the most precise focus remains inert. So our next movement follows that current into the heart's intelligence, the way feeling gives motion to the things you attend to, and how learning to ride that current transforms reaction into creation. When feeling moves, thought becomes river. What was once an idea now has velocity. It flows, carves banks, and carries sediment memories, needs, impulses downstream where they meet the world. Emotion is not decoration on top of cognition. It is the current that animates whatever you attend to, and it determines whether attention becomes a gentle shaping or a violent storm. You've felt this plainly. A small kindness can swell into gratitude that reshapes a whole day. A minor insult can ignite a cascade of defensiveness that rearranges an entire week. Those shifts are not moral failures or inexplicable luck. They are simply the dynamics of feeling meeting pattern. Emotion gives charge to thought. It supplies momentum to your inner architecture, and momentum creates form. The more charged a thought, the more likely it is to condense into experience. This is why feeling has to be taken seriously, not dismissed as irrational noise. It contains intelligence and embodied appraisal that predates the mind's commentary. The heart senses nuance before the head narrates it. Your nervous system archives nuance. When you practice listening to feeling rather than arguing with it, you access a source of practical guidance. Feeling says what is alive in you now. Attention chooses where that life will go. Feeling is ancient language, not the tidy prose of reasoning, but the oceanic grammar of bodily knowing. It speaks in temperature, tension, and tone. It shows you where your inner architecture is comfortable and where it is cramped. When you begin to translate that language, life becomes less like a series of shocks and more like a conversation with your deeper capacities. Instead of being shoved around by emotion, you learn to engage with it, name it, feel it, and then, crucially, direct its energy. Directing feeling is not the same as suppressing it. Suppression is a kind of false mastery. You quiet the surface while the current continues to rage below. The wiser move is to give feeling space enough to reveal itself and then to channel it with intention. Anger, for example, is a potent force. If it becomes a habit of reactivity, it will burn relationships and close horizons. If it is recognized, felt fully, and then guided into clear communication or disciplined action, it becomes a furnace for change rather than a wildfire of blame. There is an alchemical method to this. First, notice the sensation without story, the tightness in your throat, the hollow in your stomach, the clench in your jaw. Then stay with the sensation long enough to let it soften. Many feelings are loud because they are hurried. Slowing down the tempo reduces their charge. Finally, choose one small, constructive movement, an honest word, a breath, a step that honors the feeling's message while refusing to let it hijack the day. Over time, repetition trains the nervous system. The body learns that feelings will be heard and met, and therefore they relax their alarm. Emotion also serves as a fidelity test for your attention. If you cultivate attention without considering feeling, your focus may become austere and brittle, precise, but disconnected. When attention is infused with feeling, it gains heart. The combination of steady focus and lived warmth creates what the esoteric traditions called coherence, an alignment where thought, feeling, and action move as one. Coherence is a magnetic center. It attracts circumstances that can sustain it. This is why practices that integrate body and breath matter more than clever philosophies. Sitting and thinking will not alone transform the pattern. You must also train the felt sense. Breath is a simple lever. A slow, deliberate exhale smooths the current. A focused inhale brings clarity. Small rituals, putting your hand to your heart, naming 3 true things about what you're feeling, letting your shoulders drop are not pious gestures. They are instruments of recalibration. They teach the body how to hold a new tone long enough for outer conditions to adjust. Another practical note, feelings travel in communities. Emotional currents are contagious. When one person holds dread in a room, others begin to cough it in. Conversely, someone who sustains steadiness and open-hearted attention can recalibrate the group field. This means your practice has an ethical dimension beyond your personal life. The quality of your presence helps shape the collective climate. Small acts of composure ripple outward. Persistent equilibrium becomes a public resource. Still, there's a tender paradox. Feelings are both guidance and territory. They tell you where work is needed and also mark the edge of what has already been formed. Some feelings require healing. Others require stewardship. Learning to distinguish between the pain that asks for transformation and the pain that requests simple acceptance is a craft. The former invites creative intervention. The latter invites compassionate tending. Both require that you remain present rather than reactionary. When you persistently cultivate the capacity to feel without being consumed, something practical begins to happen. You stop mistaking intensity for truth. High emotion often masquerades as certainty. The louder a feeling, the easier it is to conflate it with fact. But intensity is not the same as accuracy. Wise practice helps you use feeling as a pointer, not the final verdict. You honor the sensation, translate its message into skillful action, and then observe what the field returns. Emotion also accelerates learning because feelings amplify experience. They create clearer feedback loops. A choice taken from clarity produces subtle but meaningful shifts in the field that you can read quickly. In this way, feeling is not a liability, but a pedagogue. It sharpens your discernment, helps you calibrate belief and attention, and shortens the path from insight to embodied change. You do not have to journey alone in this. Feeling itself is an ally, provided you do not hand it the wheel. Feeling is the engine of manifestation. As you grow in this craft, listening, naming, slowing, and redirecting, you'll find that emotional currents no longer sweep you into reactions, but power deliberate creation. You will discover how to sit with discomfort and let it do its alchemical work without letting it become your identity. You will find that grief, properly tended, opens into compassion, that anger, properly channeled, becomes boundary and creativity, that joy, when held with humility, attracts more to nourish it. All of this deepens the real question about power. When the current strengthens, how do you relate to it? Do you try to clamp down and force the river into a channel? Or do you learn the art of steering, using the current's own energy to propel you where you intend to go? The answer shapes what mastery looks like. It is not domination of feeling, but its wise partnership. And from that partnership, the next movement appears not the illusion of absolute control, but a mastery that moves with the intelligence beneath the surface, the paradox where power is found precisely in letting go. When you first notice how feeling and attention move together, it's tempting to think mastery will look like tightening your grip, holding everything steady until the world conforms. That's the usual instinct to defend, to direct, to fix. But tightening yields brittleness. The river of life responds poorly to clamps and dikes. Power that comes from force fractures, power that comes from alignment, endures. Control is often a reaction to uncertainty. You try to steer every outcome because the unknown feels unsafe, and yet the very effort to remove uncertainty generates more of it. It creates friction. And where there is friction, the field hardens. What changes the dynamic is not more force, but a different relationship to your own forcefulness. You learn to use strength without making it the only tool. You develop elasticity. There's a subtle distinction between domination and direction. Domination insists on outcomes. Direction cultivates conditions. One tries to bend reality to an idea. The other shapes the context in which reality can naturally unfold. Direction trusts timing. Domination arrogates timing. Notice how these two postures feel in your body. Domination tightens the jaw. Direction steadies the belly. The nervous system remembers the difference long before the thinking mind does. True mastery is the capacity to choose response rather than react. That capacity grows when you build a small inner space, a neutral ground where impulse can be felt and intention can be considered. You create that space not through denial, but through practiced pausing. A pause is not cowardice. It is a tactical withdrawal that preserves clarity. From that clarity, you can act with precision rather than panic. The world rewards precision more than fury. True power is a practiced looseness, surrender. In this frame is not passive defeat. It is an active, intelligent yielding that puts your energy where it is most effective. This kind of surrender refuses to mistake letting go for giving up. It refuses to confuse acceptance with approval. Acceptance simply acknowledges what currently exists. Effective surrender then asks, what next? It positions you to move with whatever intelligence surfaces intuition. Circumstance. Feedback rather than against it. There's a practical way to see this in everyday life. Imagine you're working toward an important goal and an obstacle appears. The reflexive move is to push harder, to escalate force. The wiser move is to assess, is force the appropriate response, or is a reorientation needed? Perhaps a conversation, a pause to listen, a different resource. The fluid response often accomplishes more with less effort because it respects the reality you're engaging with. It uses leverage instead of brute force. Surrender is active. It's the choice to move from force into flow. This posture also requires moral clarity. Letting go of control does not mean relinquishing responsibility. On the contrary, when you stop micromanaging outcomes, you free yourself to take strategic responsibility for what you can genuinely influence. You steward what is yours and release what is not. That discernment is the backbone of mature freedom. It protects you from burnout and from the illusion that everything depends on your modest will. There are common traps here worth naming because they sound like wisdom but function as avoidance. Passive resignation dresses itself as surrender. It uses humility to justify inertia. Perfectionism masks itself as control. It uses high standards to hide fear. Your work is to learn the texture of your own motives. Ask yourself honestly, am I yielding because I've seen a more effective path? Or because I am afraid of the friction of change? The honest answer is the compass that points toward alignment. Practices that cultivate this paradoxical power are simple and repeatable. Begin with micro decisions. Notice one thing you habitually try to force and intentionally practice a different approach. Pause, breathe, notice what wants to arise. Then choose a measured action. Keep your commitments clear and your hands relaxed. In conversation, listen longer than you speak. In planning, allow for margins. Over time, these small calibrations accumulate into a new habitus, steadiness in movement, softness in presence, precision in effect. Another essential practice is timing. There are seasons for bold exertion and seasons for patient tending. The skilled practitioner learns to read both inner cues and outer signals to know when to press and when to wait. This timing is not fortune-telling. It is learning the grammar of your own life, how urgency, resource, and opportunity align. Timing is discernment applied in time. We also need to talk about boundaries. Letting go doesn't mean dissolving your limits. Boundaries are the healthy edges that allow surrender to be productive rather than chaotic. They hold the space within which you can be vulnerable without being consumed. They prevent your generosity from becoming self-erasure. The paradox of control is held in tension by these boundaries too rigid. You break, too porous. You lose yourself. Wise boundaries are both gates and bridges. Finally, notice how this mode alters relationships. When you stop trying to force others into your timelines, you allow genuine reciprocity to arise. People respond to solidity that isn't static. You become trustworthy because your presence doesn't demand validation through domination. This invites collaboration rather than compliance. And collaboration yields forms of power that no single will could have manufactured. And as that dynamic takes root, elastic strength replacing brittle force, wise boundaries replacing frantic grasp, the last thing to change is not simply what you do, but who you are. The impulse to control softens, identity loosens, and a different center emerges. This is not loss. It is recalibration. Yourself reframes around a wider field of intelligence, not a tighter set of anxieties. From this place, perception itself shifts. The old reflexes of gripping and steering fade, and a new orientation toward co-creation appears. That reorientation is subtle but profound. It rewrites how you meet the world and, over time, how the world meets you. What begins to change isn't just your actions, it's the person taking them. And when the person reshapes, the next movement opens a recalibration that remaps identity itself, letting the sense of self expand into the larger field we've been describing. As the impulse to control softens, the shape of who you are begins to loosen its edges. Old labels, worker, parent, failure, survivor, were useful scaffolds once, but they were never the totality of you. They were maps, not the territory. Recalibration invites you to treat them as such, useful for navigation, worthy of respect, but replaceable when a more faithful map emerges. The self that has been driven by anxious insistence or brittle narratives gives way to a self that is practiced, responsive, and porous to the field. This recalibration is not a one-off revelation. It's a repeated reorienting. You will misstep. Habit will lunge back toward familiar grooves. That is the human condition, not a moral failing. What matters is not perfection, but return the patient. Steady motion of noticing where you are, exhaling into presence, and choosing differently. Each return loosens the old habit's hold a little more. Each choice refines your center. Begin by noticing the private litany that narrates your day. Then, what phrases do you rehearse? I'm not enough. I can't. These are not truths. They are habits of attention. Speak them aloud once and listen. Then, without argument, replace one with a brief action that contradicts the story. If you habitually tell yourself you're late, show up 5 minutes early for a small commitment. If you tell yourself you forget, leave a short, clear note and follow it. Small, repeatable proofs are the way new identity gains mass. They are the way the field learns to accept a different frequency from you. Identity shifts most readily when it has an embodied anchor. Thinking alone will not carry the weight of change. The body must agree. This is why breath and posture are more than metaphors. They are registers of who you are. Adopt a posture of readiness rather than contraction. Let your breath be the metronome of your reorientation, deeper, slower exhales that say, I am here. Over time, the nervous system begins to accept this as default, and the field around you eases into the revised signal. Another vital move is the recalibration of commitments. Old identities are often held in place by obligations that no longer serve you. You may remain loyal to an outdated image because it organizes others' expectations or shields you from uncertainty. Test one small commitment, withdraw from a role that requires you to perform the old self, and observe the field. You will find that the world does not collapse. It simply rearranges. People adjust. New opportunities form. The experiment itself teaches you that identity is flexible and that your presence is not contingent on any single performance. Shadow integration is central to this work. Recalibration does not mean pretending the darker parts of you vanish. They will arise resentment, envy, shame, each with messages and energy to be used. Invite them into the light without theatrics. Name the feeling. Allow it to move through the body. And then ask, what is useful here? Often the shadow's charge contains the fuel for transformation. The alchemy is simple. Feel it, learn from it, and convert its motion into disciplined, creative action. Your wholeness grows when you stop slicing off what frightens you and instead hold it with care. Community matters. Identity does not evolve in isolation. The field you inhabit includes others who will either validate the new center or tug you back toward the old patterns. Seek small pockets of alignment, people whose presence recalibrates you in subtle, steady ways. These are not necessarily your loudest friends or your busiest networks. Often, they are the quiet ones who hold steadiness. In their company, you can practice new ways of being without the pressure of performance. Over time, mutual resonance creates a microclimate where the revised self can thrive and be tested. Practice humility as you expand. It's easy to confuse growth with superiority. The new center is not proof that you were right and others were wrong. It is simply evidence that practice shifts resonance. Stay curious. Keep learning. When you meet resistance, treat it as data, not indictment. Ask what the resistance wants you to know about the world and about yourself. This posture keeps the recalibration tender rather than brittle. Embodying a new self also requires reframing the stories you tell about time. Many old identities are bound to timelines. I always will be X. I have been Y since childhood. Recalibration loosens these timelines into possibilities. Tell a future tense story that holds you in a different light. For example, I am learning to be steady. Phrase it as a present practice rather than a distant prophecy. The field responds more readily to a present tense practice than to abstract hope. Consciously test your new center with small acts of service or courage. Let your presence be useful in modest, real ways. Listen without interjecting. Offer a steady hand rather than advice. Do a task for someone without commentary. These acts anchor identity in competence rather than image. They show the field and the community who you are becoming, not by proclamation, but by practice. Identity is a verb. As the recalibrated self gains momentum, your decision-making sharpens. Choices become less reactive and more generative because they arise from a stable, interior grammar. You find yourself choosing alignment over defense, clarity over drama. Paradoxically, this steadiness yields more vitality, not less. Your capacity for joy, focus, and meaningful work increases because less energy is wasted on maintaining an obsolete image. This process also reframes loss. When old identities fall away, grief is natural and honest. Permit it. Grief is not failure. It is recognition of a chapter closed. Sit with it. Let the field hold it while you practice new orientations. Over time, grief will shape into gratitude for the role the old identity played and curiosity for the one that emerges. Finally, remember that recalibration is an ongoing discipline, not a final state. There will be seasons when the field is clear and seasons when the old maps reassert themselves. Return with tenderness. Your practice is the steady tending of a garden, planting, watering, weeding, and sometimes letting the earth lie fallow. Each season contributes to a deeper, more resilient center. You are not fixed. From this wider center, perception begins to shift naturally outward. The world you have engaged with as a set of objects now begins to appear as a living, responsive field one that carries your signal back to you, refined and instructive. That shift opens the last movement, learning to live in the world with this new consciousness fully at play, where the outer life becomes a conversation with the inner evolution we have been cultivating. When you begin to see the outer world as an echo of inner movement, life shifts from a sequence of problems to an ongoing conversation. Objects and people no longer occupy only the status of things to be managed. They become participatory mirrors, co-creators in a field you are continuously tuning. This does not mean you detach from responsibility or deny difficulty. It means you recognize that the material of life is responsive, that your attention, feeling, and belief are not private hobbies, but instrumental activators of what appears. The practical consequence is immediate and intimate. You stop treating life as an enemy to be overcome and start treating it as an instrument to be played. The way you feel in the morning, the tone you choose in a conversation, the steadiness you hold under pressure. These are not small matters. They are the gestures that shape the grammar of your day. Over time, consistent interior stance arranges outward events so that work flows with less friction. Relationships become richer, and decisions land with clearer consequence. This is not magical thinking. It is cumulative practice. Each moment of aligned presence adds one more thread to a pattern that eventually becomes visible. Your inner stance writes the texture of your days. Living in this way requires practical humility. You will not, and should not, aim to press a dominating intention onto everything you encounter. The field is too complex for such bluntness. Instead, cultivate attentional patience. Choose where you place your weight and hold it long enough for the field to respond. That patience is not passive delay. It is the willingness to let cause and effect unfurl at a deeper tempo than anxiety permits. Or, when you attend with steadiness rather than urgency, opportunities appear that brute effort could never discover. You begin to work not from a list of tasks, but from a center of ordered influence. There is an ethical dimension that follows naturally. If your inner world participates in the weaving of the outer, then your practice matters socially. Your steadiness is a public good. Your fear is contagious. This is why the evolutionary impulse of inner work is not merely self-help. It is a civic grace. When you refine your tone, reduce needless agitation, increase clarity of feeling, you participate in the refinement of the shared atmosphere. Small acts of composure seed larger climates of possibility. The person who shows up calm in a meeting does more than conserve their own energy. They create breathing room for better ideas to surface. Practically, habit is how inner work becomes reliable. You cannot be alchemical in crisis if you have never trained the small muscles of presence in the mundane. Set modest rituals that anchor you breath work before important conversations. A brief body check when you feel reactive. a habit of writing one sentence that clarifies your aim for the day. These little disciplines are not ascetic penalties. They are mechanical aids. They train the nervous system to accept a new default, so that when life intensifies, you have a practiced center to return to rather than a frantic improvisation. Over time, the small efforts compound into a sturdy interior architecture that makes larger shifts possible. Small practices become the architecture of presence. The subtlety of this work is that it asks you to hold paradox, to be internally sovereign without withdrawing into isolation, to act with intention without clutching outcomes, to be tender and exact at once. This is why maturity in the field looks less like righteous certainty and more like steady curiosity. Mature presence watches what arises, allows it to speak, and then chooses responsive action that honors both the immediate data and the longer aim. The shift from agitation to artistry is not a single event, but a repeated recalibration. Notice, adjust, return. Relationships become particularly revealing laboratories for this transformation. When you treat another person as an actor in a private drama to be managed, the exchange tightens into roles and reactivity. But when you treat the relationship as a shared field to be co-tuned, conversation lightens and mutual intelligence can arise. That does not mean you will avoid conflict. Conflict will still appear as a vivid teacher. The difference is that conflict becomes information about a misalignment to be corrected rather than proof of personal failure. You learn to negotiate the shared field with curiosity instead of blame, which often yields more sustainable repair and deeper connection. There is also a creative consequence when you intentionally steward your inner world. You begin to notice possibilities that were previously invisible. Projects that once felt like heavy lifts reorganize into manageable steps because your attention coheres the path. Creative insight often arrives not as a dramatic epiphany, but as a quiet sequence of clarifications: a line, then a paragraph, then a form. The field supplies what your readiness can receive. Preparedness meets opportunity, and form follows. As you practice, notice how the language you use shifts from reactionary complaint to precise articulation. Instead of saying, "Things always go wrong," you begin to say, "When I tighten, friction increases. When I steady, clarity increases." That change in language is not mere semantics. It is a practical reorientation. Language carries frequency. Clear speech sharpens the field. Vague lamentation thickens it. The discipline of speaking with accuracy becomes a discipline of living with more predictability and generosity. The final movement is recognition. Life is not a problem to solve, but a conversation to be had. When you treat it as such, you stop exhausting your energies on controlling outcomes and start investing them in shaping the quality of inquiry. Ask the field-useful questions. What does this moment need? How can I show up so that intelligence has room to move? And then practice listening. Answers may come as intuitive nudges, practical openings, or the soft unconfusing of a mind that has stopped flailing. Over time, the dialogue deepens until you recognize that the primary relationship is not between you and the world, but between your evolving consciousness and the living reality it helps compose. Life becomes a conversation, not a contest. And as this realization settles in, the journey becomes circular. What began as exploration ends as remembrance that consciousness was never seeking the world, it was shaping it all along. And as that recognition settles into the quiet of your days, you find the work becomes less about fixing the world and more about tending the inner flame. The practices you have learned attending with steady curiosity, feeling without being led, choosing belief with care do not make life easy, but they make you honest and effective. You begin to notice the small economies of energy, where to conserve, where to spend, where to pour light until something shifts. You will still be surprised, confused, or hurt. Those moments are not setbacks. They are the field teaching you to refine your touch. When difficulty arrives, lean into the method rather than the drama. Breathe, name what moves, and place your attention where constructive feeling can gather. Over time, the chaos of reaction softens, and a quieter intelligence governs your choices. You are the signal. Let your days be practice small rituals that align posture with purpose, sentences that match feeling with fact, and actions that prove new stories true. The world around you will respond not instantly as a trick, but steadily, like soil learning a new crop. This is the patient art of co-creation. There is one final invitation. Treat life as a patient conversation partner. Ask meaningful questions. Listen for the answer, and be willing to alter course. Take the smallest next step you can imagine, and then take the next. In doing so, you prove to the field and to yourself that new patterns are possible. Carry this work forward without drama and without hurry. Let steadiness, not swagger, be your instrument. We are not alone in this weaving. The field is alive and listens. Keep tending, keep turning, keep being the change that arrives through you, and remember to return gently, again and again. This is how the world changes now.